First top tip for winter commercial silvers is to cover your options with where you actually fish. For me, there's always two areas of your peg that you can target. The first one, a long pole 11 or 13 metres out in the lake, and that's generally where the fish will be at the start of the session. When it's cold, they back off into the middle of the lake at night and then gradually come in as the day progresses and it warms up a little bit, which is why I'd also feed a line closer in, a short line. Bottom of the first shelf, try and just come out of the full depth of the lake, normally about 5 or 6 metres out, and that's the perfect line for later in the day. So first tip, 2 lines, longer pole to start with, shorter pole for a good finish. Tip number 2 is to use a versatile approach. This time of year, I personally want to catch every single fish swimming, whether it's a roach, a perch, a hybrid, skimmer, bream, F1, tench, crucians, throw them at me. Everything counts at this time of year. I just love getting bites, and that's why the ground bait choice and also the baits you use in it are very important. You need a sweet fish meal ground bait. Fish on commercials get fed pellets, fish meal all year round, so they've got a taste for it, but they also love that sweet edge in the winter months, not too strong. So for me, mainline match, F1 dark, just on its own, is absolutely perfect, straight out of the bag, lovely dark colour, and I mix it nice and damp, and then in conjunction with that, I use a nice mix of different baits, things like dead maggots and pinkies in the ground bait, casters, very good on the close in line, and also maybe a few chopped worms, or where it's allowed, a little bit of joker. But I know that that ground bait mix and all those different baits will get me bites from a massive range of species. Tip 3, take it steady with the amount that you feed, especially at the start of the session. You can put it in, but you can't take it out. For me, 3 balls or pots of ground bait on each line, and in them balls, don't always measure the bait, but a nice flick of dead maggots and pinkies and a few casters. And one of my best tips is, if you've got some worms with you, don't put them in at the start of the day. Keep them back, and if you have a bit of a slow start, or maybe you catch a few fish and then things go quiet, chop a few worms up really nice and fine, sneak a little ball in halfway through the session, and often it'll just bring you that little extra boost that you need. But not a lot of bait at the start, and you can always up it later. Next up, how do you keep bites coming throughout the whole of a session, all 5 hours of a match maybe? And the key for me is to keep a little bit of bait going in, but you've got to stay in control of it. And for me, there's a couple of different ways of doing that. The first one is to pick up one of these bad boys. Be careful, because it's very easy, especially when you've got big hands, to overfeed. But this time of year, the water's clear, and when a few fish come into your peg and you catch them, they'll often spook. So to just bring a few back in, an odd maggot or caster falling through the water that you've pinged in with a catapult is absolutely perfect for bringing them in, refocusing them, and keeping a few fish in the area. One thing that you do have this time of year though is wind trouble, and on a windy day, I don't know about you, but I'm not so good at using one of these. So in that instance, I'd slip on a little pole pot with a sprinkle lid, and that way you can just keep your bait nice and tight. 8 or 10 maggots, 8 or 10 casters, even a few micro pellets, or later in the session, little blob of chopped worms, just dropped in with a pole pot, right accurately where you're fishing, bit of bait falling through the water, brings them fish back in. On the topic of clear water, I want to talk a little bit about the rigs that I like to use. And when the water goes clear, fish are looking at everything. They can see bait falling, which is why that loose feeding or potting a little bit of loose bait works really well. But my rigs reflect that, and I always err on the side of lighter rather than heavier in the winter. Today I've got a swim that's about 7 foot deep, and I've gone for a 0.5 gram rig, and the shotting pattern on that is a strung taper of shots in the bottom third of it. And what that'll do is give me a little bit of stability by getting down pretty quick, but then them tapered shots that get further apart towards the hook just drop in nice and slowly, just like them free offerings. Fish sat on and around your feed will see your bait falling, and often you'll get your bites just as it settles. Lighter rigs, not heavier. It's amazing how big a fish you can land using really light tackle, and by that I mean hooks and hook lengths. And a lightweight hook and a thin diameter hook length in that clear water in the winter will definitely get you more bites and put you more fish in the net, in particular the bigger and wiser ones. And normally I tend to use either 0.08 mil or 0.010mm hook lengths to either an 18 or a 20 F1 maggot or F1 pellet hook. When I use each of them, F1 maggots for me if I'm fishing single baits, single pinky, single maggot or even a caster. But if it's a bit better fishing and I want to use a chunker worm, double maggot, 2 or 3 dead pinkies, I'll use an F1 pellet just because it's got that little bit wider gate. But both hooks are super strong but incredibly lightweight, and matched to that light line, they'll get you more bites. Final tip for you is to not be scared of fishing around your bait, in particular the back edge and just past it. Often this time of year I'll pop my bait in, my long line for example, the end of my 12-metre section, but I've always got my little cheeky true extension behind me, and if I get a few bites and fish back off, or if I'm struggling but I think a few fish might be sat just past the bait, I can slip on that true extension, venture just past it and often nick a fish or two. By the same token, an odd flick left, an odd flick right, and even coming just this side of your bait can work really well. Sometimes fish are very wary of an area of feed, especially when you've caught a few, so don't be scared of fishing around the edge of it.